everyone, I'm Rebecca and I just won bias tape chicken. I know, I didn't realize that was a thing, but I am currently working on an Italian Renaissance dress inspired by the Borgias and also interspersed with, actual history. And when I left you guys off last week, I mentioned that in between last week's video and this week's video, I was going to do two things. One was I was going to finish off the boning channels on my bodice. This is my bodice. That's the front of my bodice. And the other was that I was going to bind the neckline. So I have now finished off those boning channels and I have just finished applying the binding via machine. So basically I always do my binding right sides together and then turn that over and hand sew it in place. So I've just done the machine binding and I won bias tape chicken. And this is what I mean. I needed it to go to where I have stopped sewing here. And my bias tape went just past it to there. So I won it by 1/4 inch. Though you might notice from the thread color change that I actually lost both bobbin chicken and top thread chicken at the exact same time, 1 inch away from where I needed to finish, but that's okay. So the binding is now applied. I am going to press that and pin that down so that it fully faces the inside, and that is going to get hand sewn tonight, hopefully at rehearsal. And also hopefully I will have trims arriving to my house before I leave for rehearsal so that I can show you some trim options. Though that said, I am fairly certain, without seeing like the 6 different trims that I ordered to my house, I'm fairly certain that I'm going to go with the trim that I showed you in last week's video, which is the one from my stash. Funny how that works. And that is this beautiful beaded trim right here that I'm pretty sure I got from a bargain basement at Costume College years ago, and it's literally just been sitting in my stash waiting for an opportunity to be used. Now sadly, as much as I would prefer to go all the way around the neckline plus apply this somewhere else, like on the sleeves for example of the bodice, I did a rough measurement yesterday of how much this would take to go around the neckline, how much I would have left, and I would have about 27 inches left. And at least if I'm going to go around an upper arm area right here, that's not enough to do 2, sadly. So we'll see. We'll get there when we get there as far as sleeves go, and I might not wind up using this at all if one of the trims that I ordered from Amazon is just absolutely stunning, but I would prefer to use from the stash, frankly, because that's always a good thing. And I've never had a reason to use this before, and it looks really, really freaking good. This is a little picture that I took when I was trying it on yesterday with the trim pinned on it. You can see it looks really good. So that's where I'm at with this right now. And frankly, I think that since those trims aren't here yet, before I actually press and pin down the neckline binding, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bodice back on and figure out how long the skirts need to be, because that means that I can start cutting out the skirt panels back there and actually maybe even start attaching them to the bodice. And that would be really great because that will kind of fast forward our project really nicely. So let's go ahead and put this back on and see what things look like. The bodice is back on and I have thrown on a random bustle petticoat just because that's what I had the most accessible. I don't really know technically what the petticoats would have looked like of this era. I mentioned this though in I think the first video that because I am going to be wearing this on my Springfield Castle trip in Ireland, where I'm going to be bringing a whole bunch of costumes all in one suitcase ideally, I want to get as much use out of everything as possible. So this is probably going to actually be worn over most likely an 18th century petticoat because I think that is going to be the most versatile kind that I can bring, but we'll see when we get a little closer. Regardless, it will probably just be worn over one simple, possibly ruffled petticoat. So I stuck this random one on. And I am going to be wearing this with flat shoes because I'm also wearing it to the Ren Fair, and that's a lot of walking at the Ren Fair. And really my feet prefer like a thick-soled 1 or 1.5 inch like Mary Jane type shoe. So that's what I'm going to be wearing with this. So I mean, not flat, but like basically flat. And I have just measured what that looks like as far as the good walking length goes, and it is 45.5 inches to where the seam will be, which means plus hem plus seam allowance, that is the center front length. I'm going to do similar measurements around the side, around the back, figure out the full length that I need, and we are going to cut some skirt panels. All right, I've got my measurements. Now, I should say that I originally started with McCall's 7763 for this bodice before it underwent an immense transformation, and I'm not going to be using the skirt pattern from this whatsoever. I'm going to be doing straight panels. My plan is to do 3 widths of the fabric, and I think I'm going to have to cut myself pocket slits because if I gather it evenly all the way around, that would mean that the pockets would wind up not in the right place because of where the seams are going to be. Basically, I'm planning to have a center back seam, and then probably, I guess that would make the other ones about here, but I need pocket slits to wind up lining up with this. So I'm probably going to have to make my own slits, but we'll see how the gathering pans out. I think I'm gonna be doing gathering, I should say. I'm really tempted to do knife pleats because they're so pretty. And most of the portraiture that we see in this era, we really can't see the skirts at all. So that's not helpful because I can't see if it's gathered or pleated. In this era, but in England, they were doing cartridge pleats. And I don't know that that's a thing here either. I don't think that I need to do that because my fabric isn't super thick and I don't have a ton of it. So yeah, I'm gonna do knife pleats if I can, but otherwise it's just going to be gathered. I'm going to go ahead and cut my panels to the lengths that I need them, sew them together up the sides, and then I'll probably just make those slits where I find out where it's needed. So I'm just going to fully sew up those panels for now. Note to self, do not leave bodice where cat can eat my ribbons. But at the same time, how can you be mad at this face? This face. This face that ate my ribbons. Don't do that. All right, the Amazon trims are here, so we are going to compare them one at a time. This one, I like the sparkle to it. Like, it does shine nicely, but that's because it's basically plastic. I hate the feel of this. This feels awful. And I think that when you look at it up close, if it will focus, it looks awful. So I think this is a no. This is what it looks like en masse, by the way. I think this was the one that had like 20 or 25 yards that you had to purchase. But yeah, it's just really cheap feeling. There's something really like beautifully simple about this. It has a beautiful metallic shimmer to it. That's why it's not quite focusing right now. It is kind of an odd width. I'd say it's about 0.5 inches wide. I can definitely see myself incorporating this onto the sleeves, even if not the bodice itself. By the way, I did finish binding this at rehearsal today. Technically, I think there's 3/4 inch left because I ran out of both time chicken and thread chicken on the needle that I was working on, but it's basically done. But yeah, this is very pretty, and I can see myself potentially using this. So I'm going to hang on to this, at least for now, and we'll see how we can incorporate this one. This is a lovely blue beaded trim, and it's kind of set onto a tape so that you can use it on the edge of something. So I've just kind of put it right behind the edge of the binding right now. It's very pretty. I love the way it sparkles. I'm curious to see how this would look in combination with the trim from my stash that I really like, because I do think that is very pretty and just like subtle and sparkly. And I like the blue. I feel like it's kind of all of the colors of this bodice, which is why it goes so nicely. This is an absolute no. I got this one because of this portrait right here that I felt like kind of had a similar pattern but in black. But this trim just looks super cheap. I think this is actually an iron-on trim, which I would never do it as an iron-on anyway. But yeah, this just looks really, really cheapo. So this is going back. I feel like this is very pretty. This is just a metallic jacquard ribbon, and I do feel like it's very pretty, but it's also kind of heavy with the black on there, and I just really like my beaded trim better. So I don't think there's a way that I would incorporate this on the sleeves, but I think I'm going to hang on to it for now just to see if maybe, because I do really like the pattern. I like the metallic. It just feels a little bit heavy. This last one is just way too gaudy. We're back to like looking at gold instead of silver. I think I showed you a really similar trim in last week's vlog because it was the one trim that got here yesterday from when I'm filming this. And that one was on black. And I think that actually looked better than this one that's on blue. I like the sparkle. That's nice, but it's just too gaudy. It's too much. I don't like the gold. So that is a no. So sadly, I think these two are in just too much of a conflict. This is just too bright compared to kind of the more subtle navy, almost black look of the trim from my stash here. I don't hate them, but I don't love them together either. So I am going to hold on to this at least for a while, if not just like permanently adding it to my stash because I don't think it was very expensive. None of these trims were that much. The one where I had to buy the most of it, that was the most expensive. And this is really pretty. And maybe I can figure out a way to incorporate it on the sleeves because I love the sparkle of this, but I just think that this was the winner after all, the one from the stash. Though, I mean, as I'm looking at it here, it honestly does look a little heavy too, but I do feel like in comparing the two, it's not quite as heavy as the jacquard trim, just since that is flat and this is on a sheer, and this has, I'd say, a little bit more sparkle and levity because of the sheerness and of the beading. So I think I am going to stick with the stash trim. I have to figure out which way up to put it because it only has the sequins on one side here. So I don't know if I want the sequins to be facing down or if I maybe want the sequins to be facing up. That was what I thought originally, but now I'm kind of leaning more towards down. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit. I can definitely see these two still kind of working in tandem. This is a little bit more muted of a silver, but I think that this hanging out like on the sleeves or something like that would really not be bad. I also have my tiny little silver trim that I showed you guys last week. This was already in my stash, and I think that there will be a way to incorporate this as well. And I feel like there's kind of maybe a balance here that comes like between these two silvers. They're all kind of a similar shade. It's just this one's a little bit heavier because it's solid, and this one has tiny little holes in it that you can just barely see there. And then of course this one really is just silver because of the beading and the metallic embroidery on the organza. So yeah, I think that's our winner, which is great just because it's stash. But we have 3 potentials that we're going to hang on to from this as well. And then everything else can get returned. By the way, I hate ordering from Amazon. I hate that that's really my only option. Sadly, it is my only option. We really don't have local fabric stores, especially not local stores that would sell something like these trims. And so unfortunately, if it doesn't come from the stash already, it has to come from Amazon. And again, I hate patronizing them, but I'm just stuck between a rock and a hard place. I must say, by the way, what's funny to me is I think I like this blend where it has the raw edge and then goes off into the bodice. I actually like that better than when it's like folded under because it just looks a little bit more harsh. Sadly, I mean, this is really, it's a raw edge. Like this has, I think, been maybe flame treated or something at some point in only some places. Like this place right here, this is just completely raw. But there are some places that seem a little bit more finished. And so I folded it under, but by doing that, it does darken the edge just a little bit and obviously makes a more harsh line because we're basically just going off of where the embroidery is. So I wish that I could have it out for that really nice kind of subtle blend, but unfortunately, that is not an option. So I just wanted to give a little update. I think I mentioned that I posted a poll on Instagram about whether the skirt panels should be straight or shaped, as in narrower at the top than they are at the bottom. Maybe I didn't mention that here because it's actually been a few days. But anyway, I posted that poll on Instagram and the overwhelming majority, I mean, it wasn't a ton of votes, period, but 49 people said they're straight panels, 12 people said they were shaped panels, and 70 people just wanted to click a button but didn't know either way because I added that as an option. So in any case, I'm doing them as straight panels, or at least that is my plan. I may adjust it if it doesn't gather well or pleat well into the waistband, but I have cut all of my panels. I was going to rip them because actually this fabric does rip on the grain, but I was able to fold it really nice and flat, and then the ruler like lined up with the edge of the selvage. I realized I will have to cut the selvage off of these panels, unfortunately, before sewing them together because A lot of selvages, the fabric kind of like scrunches up to get in the selvage and it's tighter on that end. That is the case with this stuff as well. So yeah, I will have to cut off the selvage before sewing them together, unfortunately, but those panels are all now cut out and ready to have the selvage cut off and be sewn together. So that is great. And then a little update as far as bodice / trims go. I decided that I really liked the look, actually, of the trim that I had in my stash, but edged with that blue beaded trim that I got from Amazon. So I have been slowly sewing that on while I've been at rehearsal. We opened tonight, but I'm still going to continue sewing it on backstage. I don't actually have a ton of time backstage in this show. So far over the last, I think, 3 nights, I have made it from here all the way around to here on the other side. So I still have this much to go on the neckline edge, and then I still have the entirety to go on the other edge. It's just a whip stitch. It's just that I don't have very long to actually sit down and do it. And my goal was to incorporate it all in one, so it took me a while to pin it on, and then I am stitching through the bodice and through both trims at one time so that I can just do one whip stitch and have that all attached. But I do think it looks really, really pretty. You can see the part that's already like at least sewn on the edge. I really like that. I think it's gorgeous. And I think that it helps to have that blend, kind of like I was getting before I folded the edges of the beaded trim, my stash beaded trim in. I think that that blue beaded trim is kind of giving that like meld edge of the colors, which looks really, really nice. I am going to go back to working on the skirt panels now. I have about an hour until I need to leave for the show. So I am going to cut the selvages off. Honestly, I will probably just serge the selvages off and then serge the panels together. Also, a lot of you suggested after, I think it was the first video went out, that I should use a pressing cloth to press this. To me, that seems like basically I need to use, you know, a full sheet of muslin for the skirt panels, but I think I'm actually going to give that a try after I serge the edges, but probably before I put them together. I am going to attempt to lay out some muslin or lightweight cotton, etc. on top of it on my cutting table, which I cleaned off this morning. It looks all nice because I had to cut those panels out, and I'm going to see about pressing like that and see if it helps to not have any marks get on the fabric. So I got a little bit of time to do some work. Let's get to it. I have just finished assembling my 3 skirt panels here, just the long side seams. Before I did that, I serged around them, cutting off the selvage so that it wouldn't be all scrunched up on the sides, and I pressed them pretty thoroughly. Now, at first I did actually try to use a pressing cloth because a lot of you suggested that after I released the first video, to use a pressing cloth to hopefully not get the marks in the fabric. It didn't work. So not only did it still leave marks in the fabric that then I couldn't see those marks as they were happening, but also it didn't get any of the wrinkles out whatsoever, even on a cotton setting on the iron. So I then removed said pressing cloth, which was just a sheet of cotton, and I instead pressed in like an exact linear motion so that hopefully all of the lines will at least be uniform. Naturally, that first piece that I had pressed with the pressing cloth was actually the front, so that's the one that's going to look the least uniform unless my new lines went over and, you know, fixed things. But in any case, they're assembled. I now need to press those seams, and then we can look at either pleating or gathering this into the bodice. So first off, I just wanted to share that I finished sewing on all of the trim at the show yesterday. It looks so pretty. I am really, really happy with this trim, and I'm really glad that I did go with the extra blue beaded trim around my stash trim. I think that they look really just perfect together, so I'm excited for how blingy and sparkly that's going to be. And that means that I can now attach the skirts. I am going to attempt to knife pleat them to the bodice. I don't know if I have too much skirt for that. Honestly, knife pleating takes care of more than gathering, and I just like the look of knife pleating. So we're gonna go knife pleating, and if something doesn't work out, I'll let you know. But basically I'm just going to pleat it evenly all the way around. I think maybe I'll have a little bit more density in the back just because that's what I tend to prefer. But it's probably going to be pretty close. So I will need to cut those additional slits for wherever it winds up lining up with the side seams here. And then I will have to do something, probably just turn a really narrow hem and like whip stitch it to those slits, because obviously I need an opening in the skirt if I'm going to have an opening in the bodice. But yeah, let's go ahead and knife pleat the skirt to this, sew them together, and then we're gonna have something that kind of looks like a gown. So I was pleating up the skirt, and I did not do this on the dress form. I was just kind of standing at my table and occasionally checking it against the bodice. But I was pleating it up, and I realized that I had kind of just like accidentally pleated up the back portions to wind up being pretty much at the side seam. And I really like the fullness of that. However, the front section right here, if this is at the side seam, this yellow pin is supposed to be the center front, except that the center front is here. So obviously we are way off. And frankly, I don't think that it should really go any less full than the way that this center front looks right now. So unfortunately, that means that I'm going to have to make the back less full, spread it out at least a little bit so that we can get this pin back to the center front. And this will be probably a little bit less pleated, less full than the back, but we're still not going to be able to line up our actual side seam or side back seam of the skirt to the side seam of the bodice. So I'm going to have to cut a slit, which is unfortunate just because I love this fullness, but this is all of the fabric that we have left. And while yes, that's enough for a skirt panel, I need sleeves. So this has to become sleeves. Admittedly though, I am honestly really tempted to try and move on to sleeves next and just see what might be left of this piece, because the length is enough for a skirt panel, but not if I cut anything across the full width. And I don't need a full skirt panel to like get me enough to kind of get that little bit of extra that I would need in the front. I would probably need like about 20 inches or so is my guess, but that is almost half of the width of this panel. So I think that if I want puffed sleeves, I'm not going to be able to add to the skirt, but I think I'm going to play around with sleeves. I'm going to look at the width that is, you know, recommended in the McCall's pattern. Just look at those panels, because the way the McCall's pattern works is that there are actually an undersleeve and an oversleeve. And apparently the oversleeve is completely separate from the undersleeve. And then I don't know if there is also a lower sleeve or if the undersleeve then becomes the lower sleeve. I have the two primary patterns here. This is the oversleeve. So you can see it is a shortened piece. It's just like that upper puff. And this is the undersleeve, which shows the placements for trim. And so it kind of seems like this is meant to be the full sleeve, but this does not seem very long. Okay, I guess it's a full sleeve for your average person and just not for me. I would need a good like 2 inches or so on the end of that. So yeah, I think that that's a kind of a weird way to do this pattern, but you know, to each their own. And I'm not going to do it that way. So looking at like the historical examples here, I feel like we do generally tend to see an upper puffed sleeve and then a lower fitted sleeve. I just don't think that this is the way that it would be done, where the lower fitted sleeve kind of then becomes an undersleeve for the upper puff. I mean, obviously that kind of gives you a way where you could stuff in between the layers if you wanted to, if you do connect these two layers, because again, I don't think this pattern actually calls for them to be connected here. But also we do see some that are a little bit longer, especially when we look at like classes of people that maybe don't look quite as high class. I feel like we see actually just one long puff. So, I mean, we have some room to play with sleeves and with what fabric I'm going to use, but I also kind of had wanted to be able to have both a fitted sleeve and a not fitted sleeve. but not one long fitted sleeve from underneath, because that's not what they would have looked like if it was just a fitted sleeve, particularly when we're talking about the Borgias costumes, because really, from what I can tell, the fitted sleeves, like we see on some of the Borgias costumes, is from way earlier than the rest of when this is supposed to take place, because we're looking at fashion that's kind of more almost as late as 1530s, and those fitted sleeves that kind of are in the portions are like pre-1490s. Again, from what I can tell, I've only done a little bit of research here, so I could be completely wrong on this, but I would like to be able to play with both of those because I feel like the bodice and skirt shapes don't really change that much, and so I could completely change the look of this by having fitted sleeves and puff sleeves and having them just tie on at the shoulders. That's why these arm's eyes are already finished off. If you did not see that in last week's video, the arm's eyes are finished off. So I'm going to connect these sleeves via eyelets. They're going to tie on because that was very common for kind of those larger, longer over sleeves. But I think I just need to kind of play around with this fabric for a little bit here and just see what I can get out of it and if I can get any left over to add to the skirts, because it would be nice to just have that little bit more. I mean, it looks so pretty back there. I'm really excited for the direction that this is going in. I'm glad I chose this fabric, even though it was being finicky. But yeah, let's play around with sleeves a little bit and see if we can manage to have some fabric left over. So I've been looking at a lot more portraiture, and one thing that I could do to make my fabric stretch farther is the fact that for a lot of these where there's the upper puff and then kind of the lower fitted sleeve, we are actually seeing a contrast lower fitted sleeve that is often nowhere else on the gown, which is good because I really don't have fabrics anywhere else on the gown. The closest thing that I have to a contrast is the trim around the neckline. So that made me think, okay, well, what do I have that might correspond with the trim around the neckline? The closest thing that I could think of was actually this, which is some silk. I don't know what kind of silk. It's a very textured silk, but it is silk that I have left over from my 1840s dress, which ironically already has lower fitted sleeves that can be attached to another gown. I don't know at this moment, because I haven't checked, if they are currently attached to the 1840s gown, but basically I made my 1840s gown originally short sleeves, and then I added, or made later and added with like loose whip stitches, these longer sleeves. So I could potentially literally just wear those, especially if they're not already attached to the gown. So that is an option. I'm still looking at other fabrics that I might have in my stash, but I would want something, I think, that would kind of pick up the sort of navy and silver vibe of the trim, but still coordinate well, obviously, with the shot taffeta. I can't use the pink from the other side of the shot taffeta because that would completely defeat the purpose of trying to save some of this fabric for the skirt. So yeah, I'm gonna have a look more around my stash. Like, just for example, I don't know if this goes, but this is Polly, and this is a matte satin from Snow White. I think this might be like my old Snow White. I don't know if this is the more recent Snow White. But I might have some other things. I might even actually have some navy velvet, which I doubt that I would be able to wear to the Ren Fair because that sounds very warm, but that might be very pretty. And it does seem like having a different texture was really popular with these lower sleeves as well, especially something that looked warmer. And so navy velvet could be really cool for an alternate lower sleeve. Basically, what I want to do is I think I want to have an upper puffed sleeve portion that can be tied up into the shoulder, and or just like large whip stitches up into the shoulder. That's fine too, because that does seem to also be a thing where it's like half set in and then you see it open, kind of like even in this costume from the Borgias. And then beyond that large puffed, I want a fitted lower portion and also a fitted upper like band that can be tied on and then tied down here. So I want versatility. I want to be able to mix and match this for different looks because I'd like to be able to wear this to Ren Fair for many years to come, and ideally not have it look the exact same every year. So I just have to play around and see what I have in the stash. Okay guys, I think I found the winner. Unfortunately, it's not something in my stash, it's a swatch in my stash. I looked at potentially taking the sleeves off the 1840s dress because they are currently attached, and I just think that this reads too silvery and it's too much of a contrast and I'm not liking it together. And I looked at the velvets that I have and it made me really like the idea of velvet. However, the only two blue velvets that I have in my stash are this navy cotton velvet, which basically looks black and it doesn't look right. It's too dark, it's too heavy. Or this cut off of a random scrap, which is A, too small, and B, it's got like a lot of junk on the bottom. Like it was, I think, the bottom part of a dress that got shortened. But I do really like the color and I liked the texture. So then I looked in my swatches because I try to save swatches when I get them from places and ideally they are labeled. And luckily this swatch from Fabric Wholesale Direct is beautifully labeled and is beautiful. Like the lower sleeves out of this, gorgeous. So hopefully they still have this. I only swatched this earlier this year. This I had swatched for Snow White and did not wind up using velvet for Snow White, but it's so pretty and it feels really, really nice. So I'm gonna hope that they have this in stock and that I can maybe get a little bit of this. I mean, I don't know how minimal I can purchase from them. I probably only need half a yard from this. My guess is I'm gonna have to purchase at least a yard, but I think it's gonna be worth it because that is so pretty together. I don't know if that's coming across on camera, but I think it's perfectly picking up the trim and it has that deeper blue purple that you get from the shift on here too. So yeah, it's really, really pretty and I hope they have it in stock. Though of course also, as I'm talking about this contrast sleeve, this was very much a 1530s thing. And if I do want the versatility of also having the like 1490s type sleeves, those would have been probably out of the same color of the dress, which kind of brings me back to square one, but also needing extra fabric. So yeah. Well, I just checked their website. They do have it. It's $12.99 a yard. That's not that bad, except that it's $10 to ship. So it's $22.99 a yard. I don't want to spend that when I need half a yard. So we're not going to get that. We're going to see about doing all of this out of the actual fabric. I'm also going to see when I have time, which is not any time in the next, honestly, probably few weeks, about potentially, there is one shop that is like a half-hour away that maybe might have velvet. I honestly don't know. But maybe I'll have a chance to go check them out and see if they do at some point. But obviously those lower sleeves are gonna wait because I'm not spending $23 on 1 yard of fabric, ever. Like, I literally don't do that. So I have some sleeve patterns here. This one, or both of these really, they are from Simplicity 9228, which is a quote-unquote vintage pattern. It looks like this. It's definitely a costumey look, but it had the kind of lower and upper sleeves in here. I don't think that the upper sleeve is a good shape, so I am actually going to bring this up, make this just a little bit like pointier, because I feel like that's what I'm seeing more. And then I obviously changed the sizes of this because this is a true plus size pattern. This is one of the patterns actually that I got from Deborah, and this goes to a size 32, which is amazing because I'm a 26 in this pattern. Like, what? I'm the small size in this pattern? What? Yeah, so that's amazing. It's not at all historically accurate, but it's still amazing that it goes that high. So I just basically changed this to my sizes because actually my upper arm is a 32, but the lower part of my upper arm is smaller than a 26. So I've kind of folded in the excess here, and I've also lengthened it by 1 inch down here, and then it's going to be like about almost an inch up here that it's lengthened as well. And then over on this lower portion, I've actually lengthened it 2¼ inches, and the whole thing seemed way too big. So I folded in all of the excess here. I think it has ease, which, you know, doesn't make sense for something like a gauntlet, especially because most of the gauntlets don't come all the way closed anyway. Like, I added seam allowance on here, but frankly, there should, I think, be a little bit of a gap. So yeah, this is the lower piece that I'm going to test out. And then over here, this is the oversleeve from the McCall's pattern. I am going to test this one, I think, as is. I have a feeling it's going to be too big, maybe, but it's also kind of weird because it's got like, it's really wide here, but then it's narrower up here, which just seems weird in a puff situation. So I'm going to try it as is because I'm curious about it. I'm going to cut all of these out, I think just in organdy, because that way if they work, I can use them as lining. And yeah, let's see how they go. So I am well aware that I should be trying on these sleeve pieces over a full chemise. I only own one full chemise and it's out in the garage and I really don't feel like getting it. And it's also white, which would mean that the white mock-up pieces would not show up at all. So I have put on this blouse that kind of has a bit of a balloon sleeve, even though they're a little too short. And we are going to attempt to try on the various sleeve pieces. I have already folded the seam allowances out of the way on this piece and on this piece, which is the upper piece. The balloon sleeve, puff sleeve part, I feel like that doesn't really matter. So we're gonna leave that one as is. But let's go ahead and try on the sleeve components, see if I got them approximately right. I mean, I did do them up with a seam here. I don't think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm gonna have like a little gap that's brought together with buttons, but this was the best way that I could do this for a mock-up. So let's test it out. Okay, top piece first. I feel like this needs to be a little bit wider around because the top pieces I think usually do have a seam together. Like down here it's not buttons with gaps and stuff. It's the lower pieces that seem to, especially in the Borgias, have gaps and all that. So I think that I need to make this a little bit bigger around because I'm not getting it up any further than this, and it is also like this sleeve is not as full as my chemise will be. By the way, I've ordered fabric for a chemise. I just placed that order today from Fabric Wholesale Direct. Yes, I did also get the velvet. So with those combined, I had a discount that took $10 off, therefore negating that shipping cost. So I went ahead and ordered those. I don't know when they'll be here. The last time that I ordered from them, the shipping was very, very slow. So that could be like literally a couple of weeks from now. But when that gets here, we will be making a chemise out of cotton voile because that's what I ordered. And I know that in the Borgias, they're showing them like always out of probably a poly organza. No, that's not happening. For one thing, that means it's completely sheer, so this area up here would be a little bit problematic. And also, that at a Ren Fair sounds disgusting. Actually, that at anywhere sounds disgusting as a base layer. No, we are doing this out of a breathable fabric like cotton voile. So anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think I also need to cut this down a little bit lower on this side because I feel like this is up in the armpit, but this is not quite as high up as I think it needs to be. Yes, I should probably be trying this on with the bodice right now. No, I don't want to be trying the bodice on right now, but I feel like even though that strap does sit a little bit farther off the shoulder, I think that this needs to be just like a ½ inch farther up the shoulder, meaning that I need to cut it down here / cut it wider so that it actually can get up there. Oh, that said though, I do think that it's sitting in the right place down here, so maybe we also need to lengthen it. I'm not really sure, but let's try on the lower sleeve portion. Obviously this is going to be a challenge since this sleeve is too short on me. Oh, this is too tight. This is far too tight because I measured myself without a sleeve on underneath. Yeah, even though this isn't actually going to be seamed together, this has to get bigger. I do think the length is probably spot on. Like, it's coming up honestly to the right place. It's just that the sleeve can't really fit in it. And I feel like this is a reasonable gap in between the two as far as like what we see with the little, you know, puffs of the chemise sticking out. So, I mean, yes, this wouldn't actually be together. There would be a gap. So maybe it is the right size, but I need to figure out how to do that as a mock-up. And I'm not really sure how beyond like, maybe I should just undo the seam and put a few safety pins on as if they were buttons. I could do that. I am probably going to use buttons instead of ties because I feel like that's going to be easier to put on, but I'm not positive yet. Also, that seems like it'd get caught on less things. I feel like ties would come untied for one thing and would get caught on things. So, okay, I'm gonna undo this seam, put some safety pins in there, drop this part down a little, see if I can make this seam allowance a little smaller just to make the upper sleeve a little bit bigger. It's fine down here, by the way. It is from like here up that is the issue, and we will try those on again. Okay, I think we have it now. This is coming up higher on the arm. It does mean that I folded down the seam allowance over here, so this does need to be lengthened by 1/2 inch down at the elbow. This I have now safety pins on over here, which are kind of acting like the buttons would. That does mean that this portion is too big. I knew that going into it because I made this part big enough to fit over my wrist. I suppose that if I'm doing button closures like that, I don't actually have to do that. I could make that tighter, but I don't know that I want to because I hold in a lot of heat here. And so even just to have it a little bit looser here, I think would be advantageous. So I'm gonna leave it looser. If I need to make it smaller, it should be relatively easy to do that until I like put the buttons and loops on there. But yeah, I think these are the pieces, the sizes they need to be other than adding that extra seam allowance there. I folded this down by about 3/8 of an inch, by the way, and kind of tapered it out by the time it got to about here, both in the front and in the back. And then this will have, I guess maybe just one, though that seems like not enough. At least one connection to the bodice. I might do more here and in the back, I think. I think that makes more sense to have additional ties. So I will most likely be doing eyelets, but at the same time, I don't know that I want to do eyelets because for the puffed sleeve, I think I want to kind of whip that into place when I wear that so that it's disconnected in the armpit, but it is connected in the top of the armscye, and then can just be easily seam ripped out. And I feel like if I were to do that, but there's also eyelets up here, that would look weird. So I might see if there's a way that I can put maybe like D-rings or something like that, or O-rings on the inside of the armscye so that I can have it so that the ties for the fitted portion disappear into it and we don't see any visible eyelets. I don't mind having eyelets on this portion. I just don't want to have them on the other, on the actual bodice. So as far as the balloon sleeve goes, let's take a look at that. I mean, yeah, I think that's spot on. I did wind up sizing this up to a size 26 because according to the McCall's pattern, I am a size 26, even though it only goes to a 22. I think that's right on all counts here, so that seems good. I don't think I need to lengthen it either because the sleeve puffs of this era could be really any length, I feel like, but a little above the elbow, I see that a lot in the portraiture. Frankly, you can see it like even up here in portraiture a lot. So yeah, I think that that is spot on. So that means now that I can take these apart and cut out them in my remaining fabric here and see how much, if any, fabric I have left to add to the skirt. I don't think it's going to be very much, and also it's going to be in next week's video because actually this has already been a week and a half. Because of last week's video with my little haul, I was able to kind of stretch this out and show you guys a little bit more since last week was tech week, and you know, I wanted to still give you some sewing progress even though I didn't actually make very much. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to cut out the pieces here and incorporate a little bit more into the skirt, hopefully, for next week. So we will start off next week doing that. But hopefully you have liked this video so far. If you did like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional sewing or costuming related content out on Saturdays, especially shorts. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. If you'd like to help support my channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to take this time to thank my absolutely amazing patrons without whom none of this would be possible, particularly my patrons at the Romantic, Victorian, and Edwardian level tiers, who are Jean, Kim, Audra, Janet, Rowan, Deborah, Robin, Nurse Anita, Linda, Jen, Nick and Steven, Dale, Judd, Joan, Nancy, Eileen, and Jacob. Thank you all so much, and thank you all for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!